the winter night swallowed her whole. She sat beneath the broken street lamp, knees pulled to her chest, counting breaths so the cold wouldn't win. Her name was Alara, though no one used it anymore. To the city she was just another homeless girl, thin coat, trembling hands, eyes that looked down too often. People passed her like she was already invisible. Earlier that evening, a shop owner had shoved her away when she asked for leftover bread. A group of young men laughed, calling her useless, cursed, better off dead. One of them kicked her bag into the gutter. Alara didn't fight back. She never did. Survival had taught her that silence hurt less. But kindness lived in her anyway. When she noticed an injured stray dog limping near the alley, bleeding and terrified, she tore the sleeve from her only sweater to wrap its leg. Her fingers were numb, lips blue, but she whispered to the animal softly, promising it would be okay, even though she herself had no such promise. That was when the shadows changed. The air thickened. The street lamp flickered. The city noise dulled as if the world itself held its breath. Someone was watching her. High above the street, hidden within the darkness of an ancient balcony, stood King Valar Nightborn, the vampire king whispered about in legends and feared in nightmares. Cold, ruthless, broken, they said. A ruler who had lost his heart centuries ago and ruled only with blood and power. He had come to the city seeking nothing more than silence. What he found was her. A fragile human girl, giving the last of her warmth to a creature that offered her nothing in return. Valar's immortal heart, long believed dead, stirred. He could hear her heartbeat, weak, uneven, yet stubbornly alive. He could smell her hunger, her fear, and something else. Resilience. A rare purity that did not beg, did not demand. For the first time in centuries, the Vampire King did not feel hunger. He felt shame. Below, Alara suddenly felt dizzy. Her vision blurred, the cold finally claiming its victory. She collapsed beside the dog, her cheek pressed against the frozen pavement. Valar moved without thought. In a single breath, he was beside her, his presence commanding the shadows themselves. He lifted her effortlessly, startled by how light she was, how fragile a human life could be. "Why do you keep giving when the world gives you nothing?" he murmured, though she could not hear him. Alara stirred weakly in his arms, whispering words meant for no one. "Please, don't let it hurt." Something inside the Vampire King shattered. He was not broken at all. He had simply been waiting. As the night closed around them, the most powerful vampire in existence carried a homeless girl into darkness, unaware that she was not just a victim of fate, but the beginning of his redemption. Alara woke to warmth so unfamiliar she thought she had died. For a moment she didn't move. She listened, expecting the usual city sounds, horns, footsteps, laughter that didn't include her. Instead, there was only silence, deep and heavy like a blanket over the world. The air smelled of cedarwood and clean fire, not smoke and garbage. When she opened her eyes, she saw a ceiling carved with strange patterns, like vines and wings woven into stone. A grand room surrounded her. Tall curtains, a roaring fireplace, a bed soft enough to swallow her pain. Her hands flew to her chest, feeling for her heart, for proof she was still alive. She was. And that made no sense. She tried to sit up, but dizziness rolled through her. Her stomach twisted with hunger. Instinct screamed at her to run, because this kind of comfort didn't come without a price. Comfort was always borrowed. And borrowed things always got taken back with interest. Her gaze fell on a tray placed neatly beside the bed. Warm bread, clear soup, and a small cup of water. The sight made her throat burn. No one had offered her food without demanding something in return. She couldn't even remember how long. Alara reached out slowly, half expecting someone to slap her hand away. No one did. She ate as quietly as possible, each bite feeling like a sin. When the warmth finally reached her fingers, she noticed something else. Her torn coat was gone. Replaced with a simple clean dress, soft and plain, as if whoever had chosen it didn't want her to feel like a doll dressed for display. A loud thought formed in her mind, sharp and panicked. "Where am I?" She slid out of bed and stepped onto a thick rug. The floor was cold stone beneath it. The room was too large, too elegant, too old. Every piece of furniture looked like it had witnessed centuries. And beyond the curtains there was no city glow. Only darkness and distant wind. Alara walked to the window and pulled the curtain back. Outside stood a fortress. Not a modern building, a castle. Black stone towers clawed at the sky. Fog rolled over iron gates. Snow fell in slow, silent spirals, and somewhere far below, she could hear the ocean crashing against cliffs like an endless warning. Her knees weakened. This wasn't a shelter. This wasn't a hospital. This was a place where stories ended. A soft sound behind her, Footsteps, controlled and steady. Alara spun around, heart pounding. In the doorway stood him. King Valar Nightborn. He looked even more unreal in the firelight. Tall, broad-shouldered. His cloak fell like darkness-made fabric. His skin was pale but not sickly, more like moonlight carved into a man. His eyes were the worst part, deep red, calm and ancient, like he had watched empires rise and die without flinching. Alara stumbled backward until her back hit the window. "I didn't steal anything," she blurted, voice shaking. "I don't know how I got here. I didn't mean to." "You were dying," he said. His voice was quiet but it carried weight. Not loud, not cruel, just undeniable. Like the world listened when he spoke. Alara swallowed hard. "Then, why am I still alive?" Valar didn't answer immediately. He took one step into the room and the air seemed to shift around him. Not with threat exactly, but with power. The kind that could crush you without even trying. "I brought you here," he said at last. Alara's stomach dropped. "Why?" He looked at her like he was studying a puzzle that refused to make sense. "Because you gave away your warmth to something weaker than you." Alara blinked, confused. "It was a dog." "And you are human," he replied as if that was the strange part. "Humans do not survive by giving. They survive by taking." Alara's fingers curled into fists. Anger rose, surprising her. "That's not true." Valar's eyes narrowed slightly. "Not in rage, more like curiosity." "Is it not? Your city left you to freeze. Your people stepped over you. Yet you still chose kindness." Alara's throat tightened. "I didn't choose it. It's just all I have left." Something unreadable passed across his face. For a heartbeat she saw it. Beneath the cold control there was exhaustion. The kind that didn't come from one bad night, but from centuries of carrying something heavy alone. Alara forced her trembling legs to hold her upright. "If you're going to hurt me," she whispered, "just do it quickly." The Vampire King's expression went still. "Hurt you?" he repeated as if the idea offended him in a way he couldn't explain. Then, unexpectedly, he turned his head slightly, as if listening to something beyond the room. Alara listened too. At first she heard nothing, then a faint whisper like wind inside walls. Valar's jaw tightened. Alara's fear sharpened. "What is that?" "The reason you must stay," he said. Her heart pounded harder. "Stay? No, I can't." "You will not leave the castle tonight," Valar said, firm now. "Not until sunrise." Alara's breath caught. "So I'm a prisoner." Valar faced her again, his gaze steady. "No." He walked toward the fireplace, stopping at a distance that felt intentional, close enough to be real, far enough not to corner her. "This castle is not your cage," he said slowly. "It is the only place I can keep you alive." Alara's voice cracked. "Alive from what?" Valar's eyes darkened, and the fire behind him reflected like blood. "From them." The whispering grew louder for a moment, like something scraping along stone, impatient. Alara backed away again. "Who are they?" Valar's answer was soft, almost bitter. "The things that come when they smell a soul no one will claim." Alara froze. Because she understood that sentence in a way that hurt. Nobody claimed her. Nobody searched for her. If she disappeared, the city would keep walking as if nothing happened. Valar's gaze locked on hers, and for the first time his voice held something dangerously close to emotion. "But I claimed you," he said. "When I carried you out of the snow. I claimed responsibility." Alara's lips parted, but no words came. A vampire king didn't claim responsibility. Kings took tribute. Kings demanded obedience. So why did his words feel like protection instead of ownership? Valar turned slightly as if fighting a thought he didn't want. "You may hate me by morning," he said. "But you will be breathing." Alara's chest rose and fell quickly. "And after morning?" He paused. Then, as if choosing honesty over comfort, he said, "After morning, we learn what you are to this castle." Fear threaded through her. "I'm just a homeless girl." Valar's eyes flicked to her pulse, then back to her face. "No," he said, voice low. "That is what the world called you." He stepped closer, just one step. "And the world," he murmured, "has been wrong before." A sudden crash echoed somewhere down the corridor, like stone slamming against stone. The whispering turned into a hiss. Alara jumped. Valar's body shifted instantly, protective without thinking. He moved between her and the door, cloak falling like a shield. His voice cut through the air like steel. "Do not be afraid," he ordered, more to the darkness than to her. The hissing receded, but the silence that followed felt worse, like a predator choosing patience. Elara stared at Valer's back, at the way he stood in front of her without hesitation. No one had ever done that. Not for her. Valer glanced over his shoulder, just enough for her to see the tension in his face. Sleep, he said. You need strength. Elara swallowed. I won't sleep. What if you? I will not touch you, he said sharply, then softened with visible effort. Not unless you ask. Not unless you trust me. Those words landed inside her like a shock. Trust. No one asked for her trust. People demanded her silence, her obedience, her disappearance. Valer walked to the door. Before leaving, he paused without turning around. I am not broken, he said, voice almost quiet enough to miss. But I have lived like I am. Then he stepped out, and the door closed with a heavy final sound. Elara stood alone in the warmth, shaking. A castle full of shadows. A king who looked like a monster but acted like a guard. And a night that promised something worse than hunger. She finally sank back onto the bed, staring at the fire. Outside, the ocean roared. And somewhere deep within the castle walls, something whispered her name like it had been waiting for her all along. Elara did not sleep. She lay awake while the fire burned low, staring at the ceiling where shadows moved like slow-breathing creatures. Every sound felt louder in the silence. The crackle of wood, the distant ocean, the whispering that returned in pulses, as if the castle itself were dreaming badly. Yet nothing touched her. No hands. No footsteps. No chains. When exhaustion finally dragged her into half-sleep, it was not fear that woke her, but warmth. Real warmth. Morning light filtered through the curtains, thin and pale, as if the sun itself was hesitant to enter this place. Elara pushed herself up. She was still alive. That alone felt like a miracle. A soft knock came at the door, 3 controlled taps. She flinched. Yes. Her voice came out small. The door opened slowly. A man stepped in, not the king. Older, with silver-streaked hair and calm eyes that held intelligence rather than cruelty. He wore dark formal clothing, neat and modest. I am Eldrick, he said with a respectful bow. Steward of the Nightborn Keep. Elara stared. You bow to me? Eldrick's lips twitched slightly. To anyone under the king's protection. Protection. The word sent a strange ache through her chest. Eldrick gestured to the door. His Majesty has requested your presence for breakfast. Her stomach clenched. Fear returned, sharp and instinctive. If this is about payment. Eldrick shook his head gently. No one here will ask you to repay kindness with blood. Not without your consent. That felt like a carefully chosen sentence. Elara followed him through endless corridors bathed in gray light. As they walked, she noticed something strange, symbols carved into the walls. Old ones. Not decorative. Purposeful. They pulsed faintly like veins beneath stone. What are those? She asked. Eldrick hesitated. Seals. Against what? Against what should not exist, he replied. They entered a vast hall where a long table sat unused, except at one end. Valer Nightborn sat alone. He wasn't wearing a crown. No armor. Just a simple black coat, his dark hair tied back loosely. Without the shadows and distance, he looked tired. Not cruel. Not monstrous. Just burdened. Elara stopped at the edge of the room. Valer stood immediately. That startled her more than anything else. You are awake, he said. Yes. You are unharmed? She nodded. Good. He gestured to the chair across from him, then hesitated, as if remembering himself. Sit. If you wish. Elara sat slowly. Servants appeared silently, placing food on the table. Real food. Fresh fruit. Warm bread. Honey. Soup rich with herbs. Her hands shook as she lifted the spoon. Valer noticed. Eat, he said. Nothing here will cost you your dignity. The words landed carefully, like he knew how fragile dignity could be. As she ate, silence stretched. It wasn't awkward, just heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Elara asked the question burning in her chest. What was that sound last night? Valer's jaw tightened. The veil weakened, he said. It always does when something different enters the castle. Her spoon froze midair. Different? Valer looked directly at her. Not at her body. Not at her fear. At her. The darkness recognized you. Elara laughed weakly. You're wrong. I'm nobody. That is precisely why it noticed you, he replied. He rose and walked toward the windows overlooking the cliffs. Most humans are loud. Full of desire. Full of fear. They echo in the veil. He turned back. You are quiet. Elara frowned. Quiet isn't special. In my world, he said softly, quiet is dangerous. A deep vibration trembled through the hall. Not violent, but warning. Eldrick appeared instantly. My king. The lower seal is reacting. Valor closed his eyes, frustration flickering across his face. Already. Elara stood without thinking. This is because of me, isn't it? Valor opened his eyes slowly. Yes. The honesty hit harder than a lie. She swallowed. Then send me away. No. The word came out sharp, final. Valor took a step closer. If you leave, they will follow. The city will suffer. And you will not survive. That's not fair, Elara whispered. I didn't ask for this. No, he agreed quietly. Neither did I. The ground shuddered again, stronger this time. A low, distorted howl echoed from beneath the castle, filled with hunger and rage. Elara's knees weakened. Valor moved instantly, catching her before she fell. His hands were cold but steady. Protective. For one breath they were too close. She could feel his power restrained like a storm held in chains. His grip loosened immediately as if he feared himself. Forgive me. She shook her head, surprised by her own calm. You saved me. Something shifted in his expression. No one had ever said that to him before. Eldrick cleared his throat softly. My king, the entity is responding to her presence. Valor looked between Elara and the trembling walls. Then we stopped treating her like a guest, he said. Elara's heart raced. What does that mean? It means, Valor said, voice firm but controlled, you will be taught how to survive this castle. Her breath caught. Taught by who? His gaze didn't leave hers. By me. The howl below rose again, furious now. Valor turned toward the sound, his voice dropping into something ancient and commanding. She is under my protection, he declared. And I do not break what I protect. The castle seemed to answer him, stone settling, seals glowing brighter. Elara looked at the vampire king who stood between her and the darkness. A monster to the world. A shield to her. And for the first time in her life, Elara realized something terrifying and beautiful. The darkness didn't want her because she was weak. It wanted her because she was something it couldn't control. The first lesson began before Elara understood she had agreed to anything. She stood at the center of a circular chamber carved deep beneath the castle. The air here was colder, older, heavy with power that pressed against her skin like invisible hands. Symbols burned faintly along the stone floor, forming a ring around her feet. They pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Valor stood just outside the circle. Do not step forward, he said calmly. And do not look away. Elara's throat tightened. From what? The truth, he replied. The chamber trembled. From the darkness beyond the runes, something moved. Not a creature with a shape, at first. It was smoke and shadow folding in on itself, whispering in voices that felt uncomfortably familiar. Unwanted. Forgotten. No one will miss you. Elara's breath hitched. Those words had lived in her head long before this place. Her knees shook, but she didn't step back. Valor's voice cut through the air like a blade. Enough. The shadows recoiled, but not fully. They know you, Valor said without looking away from the darkness. They feed on abandoned souls. Humans the world has decided not to protect. Elara swallowed. So I really don't belong anywhere. Valor turned to her sharply. That is not what I said. The shadows surged again, testing the circle. The runes flared bright white. Valor lifted one hand, power rippling outward. You belong where you choose to stand. The words settled inside her. The shadows whispered louder, changing tactics. He will use you. Kings always do. You are nothing but a tool. Elara clenched her fists. Her voice shook, but she spoke anyway. You're wrong. The chamber stilled. The shadows hesitated. Elara lifted her chin, surprising herself. If I were nothing, you wouldn't be afraid of me. A sudden violent shriek tore through the chamber. The runes flared, cracking stone. Valor moved instantly, stepping into the circle. Elara gasped. You said not to? I will not teach you to stand alone, he said, positioning himself beside her. By leaving you alone. The shadows surged toward them both. Valor raised his arm, shielding her without thinking. And then, the shadows stopped. Not because of Valor. Because of Elara. The darkness recoiled, hissing, not in hunger but in recognition. Valor felt it. His eyes widened slightly. You are not a conduit, he said slowly. You are a lock. The realization hit him like a blow. For centuries, he had ruled by containing the darkness, feeding it power to keep it asleep. Chains. Seals. Blood. Alara didn't contain it. She denied it. The shadows whispered once more, this time furious. You were meant to break. Alara's voice was quiet but unyielding. I already did. And I survived. The shadows collapsed inward, sucked back into the floor as the runes sealed with a thunderous echo. Silence followed, deep, stunned silence. Alara sagged. Valor caught her before she fell. This time he didn't pull away. He held her carefully, like she was something fragile and irreplaceable. You changed the balance, he said softly. Alara laughed weakly. I didn't do anything. Valor looked at her, really looked at her. You chose, he said. And the darkness cannot exist where choice remains. Above them the castle groaned, not in pain but in release. Ancient pressure lifted. The seals glowed steady for the first time in centuries. Eldrick entered the chamber, eyes wide. My king, the veil is stabilizing. Valor closed his eyes briefly, something dangerously close to relief crossing his face. Then he turned to Alara. You are no longer just under my protection, he said. Her heart raced. Then what am I? His voice lowered, weighted with truth. You are part of this throne's future. The words echoed through the chamber like a vow. Alara stepped back, shaken. I don't want power. Valor nodded. Neither did I. A long silence passed between them. Then Alara asked the question that had been growing inside her since the night he carried her out of the snow. Why are you really alone? She asked. Valor stiffened. No one asked him that. Not his enemies. Not his court. Not in centuries. His voice, when it came, was stripped of title and command. Because everyone I loved became a weakness my enemies could use. Alara stepped closer, slowly giving him time to pull away. You didn't? So you chose fear instead, she said gently. Yes. She met his eyes. And did it work? Valor exhaled a bitter breath. No. Something fragile stretched between them, not romance yet, not trust fully. But understanding. The kind that frightened kings more than rebellion. Eldrick cleared his throat carefully. The court will demand answers. The noble houses are already whispering. Valor straightened, the king returning to his posture. Let them, he said. Alara's heart skipped. Whisper about what? Valor looked at her, not as a weapon. Not as a guest. As an equal. That the broken king has chosen a human girl over blood and fear. The castle seemed to breathe with him. And for the first time in centuries the throne room above did not feel empty. The court gathered under blood-red banners. They came draped in silk and shadow, vampire nobles whose power had been inherited, stolen, or preserved through centuries of cruelty. Whispers crawled through the throne room like insects. A human. A mistake. A weakness. Alara stood at the foot of the throne, hands folded to keep them from shaking. She wore no jewels, no crown, only a simple dark dress. The same kind of dress she might have worn if her life had gone differently. If the world had been kinder. Valor sat upon the throne of obsidian and silver, his presence silencing the room without a word. This council has convened, one noble said sharply, to question the king's judgment. Valor rose slowly. You question my judgment, he said evenly, because I chose to protect rather than consume. A hiss rippled through the hall. Alara brings instability, another hissed. The seals have changed. The darkness reacts differently. You risk everything, for a girl. Alara lifted her head. For the first time in her life she did not shrink under their gazes. I did not ask to be here, she said softly. But I will not apologize for surviving. Laughter echoed, cold and cruel. Valor's hand tightened on the arm of the throne. She is the reason the veil stabilized, he said. Not my blood. Not my power. Her choice. The nobles recoiled. That is impossible. So was a king ruling without fear, Valor replied. The ground trembled, harder than ever before. A scream ripped through the hall as shadows tore free from the far wall, massive and furious. The court descended into chaos. Guards drew weapons. Nobles fled. Alara didn't move. The darkness lunged toward the throne. Valor stepped forward instinctively. Alara stepped beside him. No, she said gently. This is mine. She raised her hands, not in command but in refusal. I am not yours, she whispered. And I never was. The shadows froze. Then shattered, dissolving into nothingness like smoke in sunlight. Silence crashed down. Every vampire stared. Alara's knees buckled. Valor caught her, holding her as the truth settled over the throne room like dawn. No chains. No blood. No sacrifice. Only choice. Valor turned to the court, his voice carrying absolute authority. This woman ends a war older than our empire, he declared. Not by ruling, but by refusing to be ruled. He looked down at Alara, awe unguarded in his eyes. You are not my weakness, he said quietly. You are my balance. Alara met his gaze. Then rule differently. He smiled for the first time without shadows. I will, he said. With you. The court knelt, not in fear but in recognition. The broken king was broken no longer. And the homeless girl the world discarded became something far greater than a queen. She became proof. Lesson: never underestimate the quiet ones. Their strength doesn't conquer the world, it heals it.